Welcome back to the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. Today's episode will be the NFC Championship Preview between the Detroit Lions and San Francisco 49ers. This game is taking place Sunday, January 28th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff. Before we jump in today, please make sure you press that follow button right here on Spotify, as well as check out the Instagram and Twitter. Press the follow button there and help the Wedge 52 Gridiron brand grow. Help me continue to bring you guys NFL-related content into your ears and eyes. Let's jump in today with the NFC Championship Preview. In the divisional round, the San Francisco 49ers beat the Green Bay Packers 24-21. And the Detroit Lions beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 31-23. An 8-point victory for the Detroit Lions there. Looking at, how the teams performed in that divisional round matchup, starting off with the San Francisco 49ers. Their 49ers offense went 10 for 16 on third down, did not attempt a fourth down conversion, 111 rushing yards, 245 passing yards for a total of 356 yards, 1 sack allowed, and 0 interceptions thrown by Brock Purdy. That 49ers defense allowed 7 out of 13 third down conversions, 0 out of 1 fourth downs, 136 rushing yards, 194 passing yards for a total of 330 yards, 0 sacks by that 49ers defense, and 2 interceptions, one of which sealing the game for the San Francisco 49ers against the Packers. Jordan Love rolled out right and threw back across his body about 25 or 30 yards downfield. It was picked off by the 49ers defense. 49ers need out the clock and advanced to the NFC Championship in San Francisco. 49ers are the 1 seed. They will be hosting the Detroit Lions, who in their matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on third down, that Lions offense went 6 out of 14. They went 1 for 1 on fourth down conversions, 114 rushing yards, 277 passing yards for a total of 391 yards and 2 sacks allowed, 0 interceptions thrown by Jared Goff. For that Lions defense, they went 4 out of 12 third down conversions allowed to Tampa Bay's offense, 1 out of 1 fourth down conversions allowed, only 89 rushing yards allowed, 319 passing yards allowed for a total of 408 yards. They did, however, have 4 sacks on Baker Mayfield, led by Aiden Hutchinson, as well as 2 interceptions by that Lions defense, 4 sacks and 2 picks. Definitely a defense that is getting hot. And Aiden Hutchinson, who, definitely one of the premier edge rushers in the league. Aiden Hutchinson is getting hot at just the right time. I believe he has, 7 or 8 sacks in the last, 3 to 4 games. Definitely not good news for the San Francisco 49ers facing off against the Detroit Lions this upcoming Sunday. Taking a look at the 49ers and Lions team stats throughout the regular season, team rankings, versus other league, against all the other league teams, obviously. For the regular season, that 49ers offense, second in yards at 410 yards per game, third in rushing yards at 141 rush yards per game, third in points at 28.9 points per game, and fourth on third downs at 47.5% conversion rate for that San Francisco 49ers offense throughout the regular season, as well as that San Francisco defense, 7th in yards allowed at 322 yards per game, 3rd in rush yards allowed at 89.7 yards per game, 3rd in points behind, just 2 teams in that one, the Baltimore Ravens and Kansas City Chiefs, who are facing off in the AFC Championship. If you'd like to learn more about that matchup, check out yesterday's episode. But 3rd in points allowed for that 49ers defense at 17.5, and 23rd on third downs at 40.9% of third downs allowed to their opposing offenses. Looking at the Detroit side of the matchup, the Detroit Lions offense, offense 3rd in yards per game at 407 yards per game, 5th in rushing yards allowed per game, rush yards per game at 136, 5th in points at 27.1, and 10th on third downs at 41.5% conversion rate for the Detroit Lions. Looking at the Detroit defense, 20th in yards allowed at 357.1 yards allowed per game. A strong point of that Lions defense is their rushing defense, 2nd in the league at 88.8 yards allowed per game, 23rd in points at 23.2 points allowed per game, and 10th on third downs at 37.1% allowed to their opposing offenses. A couple of notes here before we head into the major keys of the NFC Championship facing off this Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. A couple of notes here. 49ers, they did struggle against the 7-seed Packers after having time off. With the 1-seed bye for San Francisco. They did struggle with the 7-seed Packers, but ultimately pulled out, got the win. However, Deebo Samuel did get hurt in that game and is, as of time of recording, looking at to be about 50-50, in terms of his likelihood of playing against Detroit in the NFC Championship. And then on the Lions side of things, they won 2 close games in the playoffs already against the Rams and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You could look at it 2 ways. You could look at that as, they're not blowing teams out, and also they could, potentially be tired from having to, fully commit for 4 quarters of both games. Or you could look at it the other way, the more beneficial side for Detroit. It could give them the edge if this game remains close, like the 49ers matchup against the Packers did. This could give Detroit the edge. They've already played in this. They will not be shocked at this, close game scenarios for their playoff run that they're currently on. Could also boost their confidence and play calling abilities / experience if the game remains close, which could be a major benefit to the Detroit Lions. Now looking into the major keys of the NFC Championship. First one is going to be the Detroit rushing attack. The Detroit's offense is 5th in yards per rush. 5th in yards per rush at 4.5 yards per rush this season, as well as 7th in the league and yards per game at 131.8, going against a pretty strong 49ers defense, rushing defense, 4.2 yards per rush allowed. That's 12th in the league, and 92.3 yards per game allowed. That's 3rd in the league, including the playoffs. Which one of these will, break through? If the Detroit rushing offense can break through, it would be huge for their offense, huge in spreading out and, pulling that 49ers defense in to hopefully get their weapons on the outside. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta going, potentially open things up for them as well. Potentially see a higher dosage of explosive running back Jahmyr Gibbs, who's averaging 5.2 yards per carry this season and averaged 8.2 yards per carry against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's been several games this season where Jahmyr Gibbs has had very high averages for yards per attempt, yards per rush for Jahmyr Gibbs and that Detroit Lions offense. But Gibbs is not the only one in that backfield for them. David Montgomery, also a very solid back. I would say probably the best running back duo in the NFL this season with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Both of them are capable of big things. And that Detroit rushing attack could, try and lean on that 49ers defense, rushing defense. If that breaks through, that could be huge for the Detroit Lions. The next major key in the NFC Championship Preview is going to be red zone touchdowns. This goes for both teams. Lions offense, 2nd in the league in red zone touchdown percentage at 66.2 to only the 49ers, who are 1st with 67.7 red zone touchdown percentage this season. Going against defenses, 49ers defense, fairly solid, 53.1% red zone touchdowns allowed for the 49ers defense. That ranks them 12th in the league, including the playoffs here. However, that Lions defense struggles with red zone defense, especially in the touchdown side of scoring, ranking 29th in the league at 64.4% of the time, allowing a opponent touchdown if they are in the red zone. That Detroit defense needs to hunker down, in that red zone, especially this week against the 49ers. But really it comes to the offenses, which offense can maintain, the strongest red zone touchdown percentage. Points are going to be, highly sought after in this matchup. Both these teams top 5 in scoring offenses. It's going to come down to which defense can, limit the other team to as many field goals as possible. Another thing to note, I believe the Lions kicking 91% field goal success percent on the season versus the 49ers, lowest of the 4 playoff teams remaining. Field goal percentage this year at 81%. I believe, not great. Final 4 teams, I think off the top of my head, Ravens field goal percentage on the year is about 95%. Chiefs is about 87%. And then Detroit, like I said, I think 91%. And then the 49ers at 81% success rate for their field goals this season. Could turn into a factor if that Lions defense can step up, try and force a couple more field goals for the 49ers offense this week in the NFC Championship than they are regularly accustomed to, or more than they would prefer going against the Detroit Lions. And then my third major key of the game is going to be Detroit's rushing defense. 3.8 yards per rush allowed this season, fifth best in the league, 3.8 yards per rush, as well as second best in the league at yards per game allowed on the ground at just 87.7 yards per game against a 49ers rushing offense who is 4th in the league in yards per carry at 4.8 and 4th in the league in yards per game at 138.9. Clearly, a majority of that is due to Christian McCaffrey and his, elite, top-tier season that Christian McCaffrey has had. Very strong running for Offensive Player of the Year for CMC. But eliminating Christian McCaffrey can force Brock Purdy into more passing situations. Like I already mentioned, Deebo Samuel potentially out for this game, about a 50-50 shot. In that regard there, we'll see. Even if he doesn't have Deebo, Brandon Ayuk's had a breakout year, a very underrated year for him. I believe second-team All-Pro. Still kind of feels like an underrated year for Ayuk, as well as George Kittle, who I believe was first-team All-Pro for that 49ers offense. But, forcing Purdy into passing situations can result in problems. As mentioned, in previous episodes of the Wedge 52 Gridiron podcast, Brock Purdy, if he's struggling, if he's turning the ball over, that increases the chances of a 49ers loss drastically. Brock Purdy is 30th in the league in pass attempts per game this season. Very efficient numbers when he does pass a majority of the time, but 30th in pass attempts per game. Obviously only 32 teams. And then Lions defense, 10th in interceptions thrown percentage. So that Lions defense does force a good amount of interceptions. Like I mentioned, I think heading into the Packers game, if I'm remembering correctly, 10 out of 16 of Brock Purdy's turnovers came in the 4 losses that he has played in for the San Francisco 49ers. If the Detroit Lions defense can force, shut down CMC, force Purdy to throw the ball more than he's accustomed to, things could benefit in their favor. Major key number 3 is that Detroit rushing defense. To sum up the major keys, primary is going to be the Detroit rushing offense, establishing the dominance, establishing, that elite running back duo that they've had all season, as well as really just coming down to, Detroit's defense, specifically against the run and in the red zone. That's what it boils down to. Detroit defense and, they're both teams' offenses, both top 5 offenses in terms of points, and I would assume top 5 both in explosive plays this season. That's all I have for the NFC Championship Preview. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you press that follow button right here on Spotify as well as Instagram and Twitter to keep up to date on all NFL news as this season wraps up here. Detroit Lions versus San Francisco 49ers for a chance at the Super Bowl. Thank you all for listening once again. And remember, go Ravens.